Spend 5 minutes in any i-dle community, and you'll hit a familiar refrain. Fans want them to leave Cube, go independent, start their own label. The grievances driving this sentiment are well documented. The merchandise stockouts, the SEO mismanagement during rebrands, the inconsistent PR treatment over multiple cycles. These are measurable operational frustrations. But viewing this strictly through the lens of a revenge fantasy overlooks how organizational design works. It ignores the cold reality of incentive alignment when one party holds the operational infrastructure and the other holds the creative assets. Soyeon engineered a highly sophisticated internal boutique label architecture, shifting the operational burden while retaining creative control. To understand the mechanics of this move, we must look past fandom narratives and examine the operational infrastructure of a publicly traded entertainment company. To do that accurately, we need strict analytical boundaries. Claims from public filings are labeled as facts. Figures calculated from those filings are derived models, and analytical interpretations are marked as opinion. Separating objective facts from emotional feelings is the only way to test if this partnership model is a viable long-term strategy for the members. This chart shows Cube Entertainment's public COSDAQ filings over a 5-year period, specifically tracking revenue and operating income. Look at the massive revenue growth across fiscal years 2022 and 2023. Cube credits this peak directly to the Tomboy, Nude, and Queen card cycles, citing i-dle's million-seller status as the driver. Then the trajectory inverts. Filings confirm a 27% revenue contraction in 2024 and a 15% drop into 2025. Whether this contraction represents transition costs or industry softening is uncertain. The drop itself is confirmed. But the trailing 12-month period exposes a sharper problem. Overhead expanded by 136%, producing an operating loss of 4.6 billion won. Expanding overhead this much against a shrinking revenue base points to a severe loss of cost discipline, a massive forward bet on touring, or both. When you correlate i-dle's activity cycles with Cube's total revenue over 5 years, it generates a clear inference model. i-dle likely accounts for roughly 60 to 75% of Cube's operating revenue. Cube is not a diversified entertainment operation. It is a single asset entity, heavily reliant on one group to cover its substantial corporate overhead. A distressed label is a dangerous environment for a creative pivot. When the investor runway shortens, the board often stops funding iteration and demands a return to whatever sold last time. This financial vulnerability is exactly why the fanbase demands the group walk away and found their own independent company. The problem with establishing an independent label is overhead. It forces the creative engine to trade studio hours for logistics, legal compliance, and HR management. Before 2024, the group's lead producer was personally building PowerPoint presentations to pitch her own title track concepts to company executives. A self-producing artist driving the majority of a public company's revenue was managing her own internal pitch decks just to secure production budgets. By May 2025, during the We Are promotions, that same group was using Cube's 8th floor executive management suites as a set for their performance videos. The months-long 2024 contract negotiation bridged this gap. It secured dedicated internal teams and production autonomy without forcing the artist to assume the operational risk of a startup. Soyeon publicly described the new arrangement as an equal relationship, where the agency can no longer unilaterally dictate behavior. In commercial terms, this implies separated accountability by domain. The group operates as an internal creative unit, responsible for the quality of a distributed production architecture, where all 5 members contribute to the output. The parent company acts as a service partner. It provides logistics, distribution, and administrative overhead in exchange for a revenue share. Negotiating this structure forced the company to fully staff and fund the organizational scaffolding around the artists. It protects their time and points it strictly at the creative problems only they can solve. The consequence of an equal partnership is that operational failures land entirely on the service partner side of the ledger. Start with product logistics. Based on consistent tour stockouts, the operation appears to be missing measurable revenue opportunities. Industry standard merchandise attachment runs between 25 and 35% of gross ticket revenue. Cube's historical execution suggests they run at roughly 10 to 15%. Recovering that 4.8 billion won shortfall on a 30 billion won tour requires no new songs, tour dates, or creative effort. It requires competent supply chain management. The second failure is organizational design. The group's commercial value rests on a distributed model. 5 members represent 5 distinct market footprints and 5 compounding revenue streams. When the official PR operation applies differential treatment, delaying posts for simultaneous schedules, or defaulting to silence during controversies, it degrades the portfolio's aggregate value. Shrinking an individual member's footprint through passive support directly shrinks the group's market penetration in regions like Taiwan and the Sinosphere. We know from public disclosures that Cube established a fully dedicated team for the group in early 2024. Capacity constraints are not the issue. In product development, when a dedicated unit repeatedly produces the same category of defect, the individual staff members are rarely the root cause. The failure lies in a broken review process or a structural management directive. A distributed architecture collapses if you only actively maintain a single node. The entire model relies on compounding individual success. Building an automated crisis response protocol and pre-planning simultaneous regional schedules does not require a larger operating budget. It requires a functional management mandate. These logistical gaps and PR inconsistencies are structural breaches of the service agreement. They actively constrain the revenue base that sustains the entire corporate structure. Despite 2 years of revenue contraction and a 50% stock decline, we have to look at the actual balance sheet to gauge the immediate risk. The data does not point to an imminent collapse. Total assets sit at 335 billion won, backed by a highly conservative 0.04 debt-to-equity ratio. The financial runway exists. The question is whether both sides of this equal partnership will meet their structural obligations before that runway is tested. The creative unit owes the company commercial output capable of funding the operating overhead and securing the conditions for their own artistic pivot. The service partner owes the creative unit flawless logistical execution. They must capture every fraction of value generated by that output. That means actively building out underdeveloped regional infrastructure. The members have already proven their individual market penetration in Taiwan and Southeast Asia. The demand is there. The commercial architecture to monetize it is lacking. It also means fully capitalizing on high-visibility milestones. The July 2026 Lollapalooza Chicago performance is a strict execution test for Cube's operations team to manage English-language press, Spotify editorial integration, and festival-scale logistics. If the creative unit delivers an artistically significant project, but the service partner fails the commercial infrastructure around it, the resulting revenue gap will generate institutional pressure against the group's creative autonomy. The 2027 contract window represents the point where this data translates into leverage. If the revenue stabilizes, the current equal relationship remains the settled foundation for the group. If it doesn't, that same relationship becomes the primary subject of the next negotiation.